education was not designed for women. And for the first 600 or 700 years, women were absolutely not welcome there, which is not to say there weren't a few women who didn't slip through, either because their father was a professor, or they cut their hair and cross-dressed and pretended they were male. So, you know, it happened a little bit in the halls of higher education in Europe. But basically, for 500 or 600 years, what was, not only were women not welcome, but what was taught in higher education was kind of based on some really stupid things that Aristotle said back in the 4th and 5th century about how stupid women are and how they're not, you know, suited with brains that can do. So that kept getting repeated throughout Western culture, and women not only weren't welcome there, but they were also part of the problem was created in academia about what women are and what we're capable of. So that started to change as kind of the Enlightenment introduced ideas about democracy and participation. And in the 19th century in the United States, sometimes these changes are driven by economics also. The Industrial Revolution created a need for more of an educated workforce, male and female, but particularly there weren't enough workers. Some of these economies were very labor scarce. So if you want your factories to run, at some point, you know, you might have to accept that it's going to be women who are doing some of the work. And in fact, it came to seem that in some industries, women were better suited because, for example, in the textile industry, women tend to have smaller hands, and they can get into those machines and make those little fixes and stuff. So women, working women, poor women, started to come into factories, but there was also a need at the higher strata for women who had an education to work in offices, because there weren't enough men to do that either. And war pushes this forward always. Every war is terrible, it's devastating, it's awful because people die, but it also creates some opportunities for women because there aren't enough men. So middle-class women started getting more and more office work, and particularly after the Civil War, there was a lot of push to let women actually go to college. So the first college that allowed women was Oberlin, and I believe that was in the 1840s and the 1850s. One of the first colleges was Oberlin, which was coeducational, which was very controversial in those days. Should women be allowed to be in the same classroom as men? Ironically, what happened in every college, including UC Berkeley, is that women kicked men's butts, grade-wise. So, you know, the top 10 in every class turned out to be women, so they had to start figuring the grades separately so women wouldn't make the men look so bad. But anyway, that's a sidelight. By about 1900, the idea of two-year colleges for not only women but also for African Americans started to catch on. It became popular for those two populations because these are populations that don't have 4 years to mess around, relax, you know, go deeply into all of their studies. They needed to get in, get some education to do what they were going to do, and their options, as we've already discussed in here in many ways, were quite limited, and then get out. So all over the country, really starting as early as the 1820s, seminaries or academies were set up that gave women 1 or 2 years of education to prepare them for one of the very few professions that were open to women. One was teaching, usually very small children. You're not going to be able to teach a high school until well into the 20th century, or nursing. So those were the two options that women were prepared for really throughout the 19th century, and they didn't go to four-year colleges. They really weren't welcome for the most part until a few radicals started setting up colleges, as I've said. And the other population was African American men and women, especially after the Civil War. A two-year college makes sense if you are living hand to mouth, and you also have, you all understand this, you also have to work while you're taking your classes, and you don't, again, have 4 years to while away and just relax and kick back and go deeply into, you need to learn a skill or a trade or a profession pretty quickly. So the two-year model existed, and it was picked up in Illinois, in California, in Washington State between about 1898 and 1910 as a really practical way. They weren't thinking of women, to help men get their first 2 years of undergraduate more cheaply so that they could then transfer and they wouldn't have to clog up the four-year colleges with a lot of remedial and basic skills classes. So it caught on like wildfire in California. There was enabling legislation in 1907 called the Caminetti Act, named after an Italian. I keep meaning to look into who this guy was. And Gavilan College was number 11 statewide.
wasn't called Gavilan. It was called San Benito Junior College. Most of the colleges that started between 1910 and 1920 glommed onto a high school. And they used the same high school teachers and the same buildings, but they offered what they referred to in those years as grades 13 and 14. You go through grade 12, and then grades 13 and 14 are the first 2 years of college, or you're what they used to call a junior college, which now we consider condescending, and we try not to say junior college, we say community college, but that's a whole historical development. So when that happened in our area, I have to say I spent a whole semester of a sabbatical researching why San Benito County. It's not the most likely place. It was way smaller and more rural and isolated then even than it is now. Not to diss Hollister, I love Hollister, but it was a pretty small place, and it was not, it wouldn't be your 11th choice for starting a community college in California if you were able to look at places with more population. Number one, by the way, was Fresno. So that's also not very predictable, but they argued we're 200 to 400 miles away from Berkeley or UCLA, which were the two big colleges open publicly in the state at the time. So 1919 was a new world. World War I was ending. Thousands and thousands of vets were coming home. In San Benito County, they were preparing to welcome home more than 500, and they were coming in batches. One of these vets was my grandfather, who was from San Martin. So I often wonder, what he knew about the founding of this college and whether he related to it in any way. I know he didn't attend, but the war changed everything, and it changed everything for women. And we've talked a little bit about this. Women suddenly got the vote in 1920. They'd been trying since 1848 in some pretty strenuous ways, and it suddenly happened because the President of the United States and many other people were convinced for the first time, it took them a long time, they're slow learners, that women made important contributions to the war effort, and so, okay, let's give them the vote. And with the vote, this optimism about everything else that women might be able to do kind of contaminated, infected all of society. Women's fashions changed, which we talked about last time. Suddenly the dresses are short and you're not carrying 7 pounds of hair on your head, and educational opportunities changed. Expectations changed as far as your family obligations, your work, etc. But the college was not designed for women. And to think that it would be foolish, because no college in 1919 was designed for women. The fact that women have come here in large numbers, and there have been programs, in particular the ones that our guests are going to talk about, was collateral benefit. It just happened, and no one possibly foresaw it, although I bet there were some women back there who were like, this might be a hidden passage for us to something that they don't really think about, but we're going to use it in ways that they didn't anticipate. So Gavilan College was probably designed to thank male veterans for their service in World War I, and also to give bright men who were stuck in Hollister and who would have to take a 2-hour train ride from Hollister to San Jose Normal School, which became San Jose State, was the most viable option for males, and women also could go there, especially if they wanted to become teachers, in 1919. But not every family could spare the money for train fare up and back every day, or the son or daughter. There was a lot of work at home that people had. So the question is, so many women benefited, and I'll give you a specific example of that. It's kind of astonishing to ask why, and the records are all lost. They were burned up in a fire, so we don't really know what the town fathers, most of them male, were saying when they were trying to argue for the founding of the college. But we do know that women, as you already know, because we've discussed it in class, were told that their goal in life was to marry and have children and make some husband happy, and that education was for men. And if you wasted your time getting a college education, you weren't on it in terms of finding the right man. You were diverting your energy down another channel that wasn't as good. Plus, no man in his right mind would want you, because you'd be argumentative, I know you. And, you'd try to tell him what to do. I mean, what man wants that? A woman who's more educated or smarter than he is. So girls were generally discouraged. So what happened in San Benito County is one of those accidents aided by historical reality that make history so much fun. We don't have enrollments records. Those burned up. So we don't know if there were 30 women and 32 men or whatever in the first class. What we do know is the first graduation. And here's the most amazing part of the story. When I saw this, my eyes kind of popped open. 9 students graduated in 1921. It opened in 1919 in September, and they had 2 years, and they graduated, they were on time. With 8 of the 9 were women. So how did that happen? Isn't that amazing? However, it's not so unusual. The faculty and the graduates continued to be majority women most of the years between 1919 and 1941. And then, of course, during World War II, 1941 to 1945, the men all went away. So more women came into the faculty, more women, kind of came into the college. And then that doesn't change until after World War II, when so many male veterans are using the GI Bill, which is a new idea to kind of pave the way back into a successful life for the men who sacrificed so much in Europe and in the Pacific. But it's pretty remarkable that Gavilan had so many female teachers, had a dean of women. There were so many women that they had their own special dean, and had lots and lots of female students. So I did invite some of our older pioneers, but in the middle of the coronavirus, nobody over the age of 70 rightly wants to come out and meet a bunch of college students and shake a bunch of hands. So they're not here to tell you about the 40s and the 50s and the 60s at Gavilan College. But a lot changed for women in the 1960s, and we have 2 women here who lived through those changes and lived through some of those changes at Gavilan. And so I'm going to introduce them both and then kind of ask them questions to tell their story. So Susan Dodd, I believe, grew up in Chico, California.
I went to Chico State, but
Okay.
I grew up in Ripon.
Okay, Ripon, that's right. Okay, a little agricultural town in the middle of the Central Valley. Outstanding athlete, particularly outstanding tennis player. She was a nationally ranked tennis player in her youth, which she could tell us more about. And she was hired at Gavilan in 1976, specifically to take a very male athletic structure and suddenly, magically, presto, changeo, turn it into something that was friendly to women, which was not an easy assignment. That's all I'll tell you. I'll let her tell you the rest. We also have Valerie Ortega, who we were trying to figure out when you arrived.
Late 70s.
Okay.
76 or 77.
Okay, around the same time, probably, as a student and as a single parent. And who not only went through her program academically here, but also worked here, and she'll talk about what she did and who she worked with. But she's notable because she's one of the pioneers, for many reasons, but one of the reasons, she's a pioneer with a program that Gavilan successfully sustained for 10 or 15 years before it cut it suddenly, which was a sad day for a lot of us, a program for reentry women, women who had been out of school. Many of them had had children, been married, some of them divorced, some of them left abruptly with a family to raise by a husband who walked out, and who saw Gavilan College as an avenue to start supporting themselves and living independently despite whatever had happened. So these are our 2 informants today. So we're going to start with Susan, who they got some questions in advance, but I'll probably ask some other ones too. So who were you, Susan, when you first walked onto the Gavilan campus?
Out of high school, I attended San Joaquin Delta College, a community college in Stockton, for a year. Played volleyball and basketball. I then transferred to Chico State and a physical education major. And during my time at Chico, I played field hockey, tennis, basketball, and volleyball. Then I got my teaching credential and went to a job at Porterville taught high school, Porterville,
tiny little
yeah.
valley
For
town.
2 years, taught high school and coached the girls' volleyball team. And thought, that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life, so I looked into graduate assistantships and took a graduate assistantship in Connecticut, where I was able to earn my master's degree, teach a little bit, and coach basketball. And then from there, I was looking for jobs, didn't have a job for a year, so did a lot of things. Learned how to drive a school bus. I substitute taught anywhere from kindergarten to 12th grade, coached basketball, and then was fortunate enough to get the Gavilan job. So that's kind of my background to bring me to Gavilan.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got the job here?
I was, the job opened up as a result of Title IX, and
Can you explain what that is?
Title IX was equity for men and women, boys and girls, and not just in sports, but equity generally speaking. And there was a position that opened up in the Department of Physical Education. I think an assistant football coach had left, and there was a full-time position. And the Board of Trustees decided at that time that we needed to address Title IX. So a full-time position was opened up, and I, again, was fortunate enough to get that job. It was a job created to teach physical education and to start the women's sports programs. And my first year at Gavilan in 1976, I coached all 3 women's sports that were offered. I coached volleyball in the fall, basketball in the winter, and softball in the spring. Quite an undertaking. So that's kind of my start to Gavilan.
But that's not all you did. I also have heard that you were out there, she's a tennis player, raking the tennis courts on weekends.
Tennis is kind of special to me, and so our tennis courts weren't in the best shape, and there were cracks and weeds coming, so every year, every spring, I kind of took it upon myself to keep the tennis courts in shape. I taught tennis classes, but it was just kind of my little baby, kind of, so to speak, and so, you know, you did what you had to do.
They are named the Susan Dodd tennis courts, by the way. If you walk out there now, you'll see the sign. Some of us wept when they took that sign. That was a pretty proud moment.
That was pretty amazing, pretty humbling.
Yeah. What was your goal? What'd you come here for?
I came here to, I knew high school. High school is a great environment. I wanted to teach since I was probably 6 years old, 7 years old. I wanted to teach, and my cousins would always give me a bad time because when they'd come to visit, we'd play school, but I'd always get to be the teacher. So, I've always wanted to teach, and I was originally going to teach 6th, 7th graders. I kind of wanted to teach that level. And then when I got into high school, my high school physical education teacher was a big influence on me and said, yeah, why don't you go into teaching, but why don't you teach high school or teach physical education in particular? And so I did that. And then once I got into high school, I thought, well, it's nice. My first high school teaching experience was, I was like right out of college, 23, 24, teaching high school seniors, which are 17, 18 years old. So our program was, freshmen had their separate program from the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So I said, I'll teach the freshmen because I liked the little age difference, and they were young coming in, and I was kind of rookie coming in.
You were not much older.
Yeah, no. Yeah. But anyway, after high school, 2 years teaching, I thought, well, that's nice, but it's not where I want to be the rest of my life. Community college was kind of a goal for me, and so, again, fortunate enough to get the Gavilan job.
So can you describe the state of women's sports when you arrived?
It was non-existent. It was non-existent. The women were happy to have the opportunity to have teams. It wasn't well received by the men in our department, unfortunately. At the time, again, there was a position that opened up as a result of a football coach leaving, and all the men in the department at the time wanted another football coach to be hired. And when the board said, no, we're going to address women's sports, it wasn't the best environment for me or anyone to come into because, it wasn't that welcoming, let's put it that way.
So you're too nice to name names,
Yeah.
but can you talk a little bit about how you were made to feel unwelcome?
Well, it just, I mean, they wanted another football coach, and so that was, it was just different. I don't want to speak badly about the department, because all in all, it's a great job, it was a great job, but,
You won them over sooner or later.
yeah, well.
They came around.
They did come around. In fact, some of them then started coaching some of the women's sports, and that was positive. Also, I had the opportunity to serve as the athletic director, and I think hopefully I had a little bit of influence there in bringing them around.
Weren't you the first female athletic director in the
I
state
was
of California?
one of two, one in Southern California, one in Northern California. I was the first one in Northern California, yeah. Yes, Gavilan's been a great opportunity for me.
So how did you create a successful women's sports program?
You know, the women were happy to have a program, so they came, wanting to play. Just like any other program, you try to provide a good opportunity. We had our own conference. We didn't compete in the men's conference, which was called the Coast Conference. We had our own conference called BACWA, Bay Area Women's Collegiate Athletic Association. So like anybody, you work hard, you make the program interesting, viable.
Who were your supporters? These people we can name by name.
The Board of Trustees was very supportive, they're the ones that made the decision to have the program. Our first president that I served under, Dr. Rudy Malone, was very, very supportive of the program. Bill Rimo then was a dean of instruction. It was not a VP position. He was supportive.
And so you're doing a lot of coaching of women's teams. You also coached football for a while.
No, that was, I in the spring, in the off season, as athletic director, we didn't have a coach. So as athletic director, I kind of oversaw the spring schedule, the spring workouts and stuff. So I did coach men's tennis.
Are there differences in coaching women and men that you've noticed?
I don't know that there are differences, but it did take me a while to understand the differences in the men, as far as the men in my department and our department coaching, and their personalities. I think one of my biggest lessons I learned was I one time got into a heated argument with one of the other male coaches in our department, and words were said, very heated, and it's like, finally, I left and went off, and the next day when I came to work, this same person that I got into a heated argument with said, "Hey, Susan, how you doing? How are you?" And I'm going, "What are you talking to me about? I'm mad at you," or whatever. And it was like, it seemed like males could get into those heated arguments and, that's it, it's over. Whereas me, or I'm just saying females maybe at the time, carried it with them a little longer, and it took me a little longer to get over. And once I learned that lesson, it went much more smoothly. Yeah.
There have been LGBTQ athletes at Gavilan, I'm assuming, from the beginning, although people haven't always been comfortable coming out. Have you ever been in a position where you've been able to support LGBTQ students?
Yeah, I myself am lesbian, I'm gay, so I'm not very open or out about it, but at the time, I had some of the students on the team who were, and we'd have gatherings at the house or get together and that type of thing to be supportive.
Good.
Yeah.
So I'm not as old as you are, but I'm not far behind, and my memory is that it simply wasn't safe to be out.
Yes, that's true. I'm a little closeted still myself, only because, I'm from a different era, different environment, and I admire the people now who can be so open and out, and it's not comfortable for me to do that. But yeah, it was not safe. My high school physical education teacher was gay, and it was, I can only imagine the environment that she lived in. It was not easy, much, much nicer now.
So what was one of your best moments teaching or coaching at Gavilan?
You know, that first class was very, very special to me, the first class that I had. In fact, the volleyball program had a reunion not that long ago and invited me to it, and I tried to get together as many of that first year's class, and probably out of 12 to 15 that were in that first class that I had coaching, you know, we're about 6 or 7 that came, and that was a nice gathering. We still stay in touch. That was special. But, you know, I think the support of the administration's always been pretty good too.
Good. So what changes did you see in the programs here in your time here?
The changes, I think, one of them was going from our own conference. Like I said, we had our own women's conference, and the men had the coast conference, and the two conferences came together, and the women melded into the coast conference, and that was positive. That was a positive change. The women coming into the programs now have so much experience. They play club sports. They're very, you know, they come into it playing softball as a 6-year-old or whatever, where the people that came into our program when it first started, you know, just barely had any exposure to the sport. So those were positive changes. And one of the big changes was when the department was able to hire a full-time administrator. When Ron Hannon, you know, is in that position now, but when the administration of the Board of Trustees decided to do that in 2000, that was a huge change.
It takes a lot off the shoulders of the faculty.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, not yet.
Okay,
Okay.
There'll be questions,
Okay.
I'm sure.
Be fine.
Okay, so, Valerie.
My turn.
Yeah. So who were you when you first walked onto the Gavilan campus?
Well, I was a single parent, going through a divorce or in the middle one, and decided it was time for me to do something to help myself and my kids. Do something different because I didn't want to work at fast food for the rest of my life.
Are you from this area?
Yeah, actually I was born in San Jose but raised in Gilroy.
And went to Gilroy High?
Mount Madonna. Well, I went to Gilroy High shortly. And I ended up one of the first students at Mount Madonna Continuation School. Graduated there did my 4 years into grade school.
It still is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked it.
Yeah. And how many kids did you have when you arrived here?
3. I had my oldest, Angie, and twins.
Why Gavilan?
Well, it was close. I couldn't really travel too far. I didn't want to leave my kids for too long. And it was close, but I was referred here, actually, to the Women's ReEntry program. And it was, I think, I wasn't one of the first students. It had been going for a couple of years, and it already had a good reputation. As soon as I walked on campus, started talking to Rolf Bruckner, the counselor. He realized where I belonged over to the ReEntry program, which was downstairs, and took me there. I met Joyce Glass and Kathy Zanger, and then there was no stopping it. They just took hold of me and helped me do all. The ReEntry program was a great program. It helped you fill out any of the forms you needed to fill out, pointed you in the right direction, helped you figure out your classes. Provided tutoring and just about anything. It's a support system.
So before you came to Gavilan, had you been a really interested student, or were you kind of not so interested in school?
I was always an interested student. I was interested in. I was raising kids, so I was under the impression, like most women at that time, you had to get married, raise kids, and be a homemaker. For a short period. It didn't last.
It didn't work that way.
No, it didn't work that way.
So what do you want out of your time here, walking in the door? What were you hoping for?
I just wanted to be able to have a good job and provide for my kids. I wanted them to be able to do something different than what I did. And it worked.
It worked out.
Yeah.
So tell us about your academic experience. What kind of classes did you
I did,
offered, including
yeah.
the first ones.
Yeah,
Tell us about those.
sociology of women was offered while I was here. They had nothing like that during high school, of course. Any other subject didn't include women's studies or women's history or not much about women at all. That was amazing. I love to write, so I ended up in the writing for the Rambler here on campus, and
The student
with
newspaper.
yeah, with Mr. Funk, Robert Funk. Yeah, he was an awesome teacher. I ended up teaching English as a second language for a while because one of the women went on maternity leave, and they needed someone to teach, and at the time I was able to, so it was fun. I even cleaned pools for a while.
So you did a lot of jobs here.
I did, yeah. A lot of tutoring, I worked with Millicent Kellogg, worked with the gender equity program they started out here, they had going.
Didn't know that existed. What was that?
It was just, we're trying to get women in more positions and trying to make it easier for them to come to school.
So you mentioned some really famous people who, I knew that Bettina Althecker taught here.
Oh,
I
yeah.
had no idea Kate Millett taught here.
Miller,
Miller. Kate
Yeah,
Miller.
yeah.
She's really famous also, and she taught a sociology class.
yeah, she did. And she's part of our reentry program too, and a lot of us at the reentry at that time ended up hanging out together and went to each other's homes. And Jean Burrows was here, she was a teacher out here. And we gathered at her house a lot, and Kate was always there.
So did you have special classes as an older reentry student so that you were only with other reentry
No,
women?
we went into the, and at first, when I first started out here, I was a little worried about mixing in with high school kids, thinking, be the old lady in the group, but they were all accepting. It was not bad at all. In fact, we did a lot of, at the reentry program, we did helping other students. We mentored a lot of students. We mentored a lot of the new students coming in from high school.
So of course they're gonna like you.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a women's reentry. Men were part of the group too. We had quite a few men that came through our program and went on to do a lot better.
Okay, how high were your grades? How high were the A's? The joke is, the more worried a reentry student is at the beginning of the semester, the higher her A at the end.
I
So-
think I probably ended up with a 3.0. Yeah, I didn't do the 4-pointers. We also, we had kids to take care of, and they took a lot of time.
Come back now, you'll smoke it.
Yeah,
You know?
I think I'm too tired. Well, I'm still taking care of kids. I got a great-granddaughter now that I take care
Okay,
of.
well,
So,
that's a lot. So did you participate in any extracurricular stuff besides the classes?
mostly what I did was, I bowled. I took bowling with Porter, Mr. Porter.
Mr. Porter?
John Porter, yeah.
John Porter taught bowling?
Yeah, he did for a short, well, when I was in it, he did.
Before my time.
John
Yeah.
Porter taught
Not
bowling?
Paul Latsky?
He was, Paul, well, I think he took over for Paul. For some reason, Paul wasn't doing it.
This is very weird. John Porter taught bowling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't see
I
that either.
can't see that either.
No, he was fun. He was a lot of fun.
I'm sure it was. John
Yeah.
Porter was an art teacher who was, how should we describe him? Flamboyant.
Flamboyant, yeah, that's a good word,
Okay,
Susan, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I took that type of extracurricular. But we did a lot of, we did things like we started a bunch of us women from reentry, some of the teachers got together with the Bridge Counseling Center. We started the first rape crisis services in Santa Clara County. Because before then, everyone would have to go to Salinas or San Jose for that situation, to take women
I've
to
heard Lisa
services.
De Silva was.
Oh,
part of
Lisa,
it.
yeah.
Yes, who's the only person who still.
She was out
working
here at the time.
At Community
Yeah,
Solutions.
her and I
which-
worked together then.
Well,
yeah.
this group that you started for battered women
Yeah, that
became
was it.
this huge agency called Community Solutions with 100 unions.
Well,
and
actually, they were, was part of it. See, Community Solutions, when I left here, when I also finished my bachelor's while I was here through Antioch, off and on doing that, but I ended up counseling at South Valley Counseling Center in Gilroy, alcohol and drug counseling. And then at one point, we merged with the OWL and the Bridge, and that became Community Solutions. And the Rape Crisis Services we had put that through the Bridge at the time.
So somebody saw the need for rape crisis services.
Well, yeah.
Was this women who were in your classes who had
In our
rape
class, yeah.
situations?
There was a group of us, I think it probably started with or the Bridge. They had a lot of calls to work with women who have been raped. We developed a program through the women here at the ReEntry program and some other people on campus to provide advocacy, take them to where they needed to go. And we had they trained us, and it was awesome. It was fun.
She's
A lot
talking
of fun.
about it kind of casually, but this is an extraordinary achievement in a community that has no services like this for women to fight for. It can't have been easy.
No.
I mean, you're making it
It
sound
wasn't.
easy.
No, it wasn't easy. We had to write the whole program. We had to sell it, and different people on the group had. I did a lot of writing. I learned to do grant writing and things like that while I was working with it. We had people who were counselors and a therapist or two.
So you've mentioned, like, how long were you at Gavilan?
Off and on.
You did a lot here.
Well, I went out to work like with the different place. I was an administrative assistant at a greenhouse at one time through another.
On campus.
Huh? Oh no, outside
Oh, okay.
in the community. Yeah.
Okay, so you also
That's
had
when I left
jobs.
after my AA. Then I came back when I was studying for my bachelor's and did other jobs here on campus. And
Okay, so can we just take a second?
yeah, it's
and
hard.
talk
It's
about your
kind of, I
jobs?
have to think about it. It's been a long time, guys.
Well, even if we just get some of your jobs, it'll be interesting
Yeah.
historically to see the variety of work that you, so we've heard about off campus, you worked at a greenhouse.
Mhm.
On campus, you cleaned the pool.
That was one of them. Yeah, that wasn't my favorite, but it was a job.
Okay, what else did you do?
I tutored. I worked with Millicent, and for her, I helped. She was a kind of assistant, helped her with her class schedules and stuff. And then I also read tapes for the blind that were here on campus. And
Girl,
God, there was a lot. I worked with Eileen Parker over in the Learning Center. Yeah, so I think that's it.
So, did you come out of Gavilan feeling more confident about
Oh.
your ability to navigate this world?
Yeah, when I came in, I didn't talk to hardly anybody. I'd go downstairs where the offices were, sit in the corner, and just kind of listen and watch people. But yeah, my confidence was raised, totally self-esteem. I finally realized I could do what I wanted to do. That I didn't have to let anything hold me back.
So, I think you're Mexican-American.
No, everybody thinks that, or Portuguese, which I'm not neither. My stepdad was Portuguese. My ex was Mexican-American. I'm Irish.
Okay,
Other things thrown in, and a Native American,
okay.
some thrown in too.
So,
Heinz 57 is what we call it.
yeah, well, it's a good mix.
Yeah.
Did you feel that you were able to learn things about your own identity and heritage that were valuable at Gavilan?
I think, as myself as a woman, I always knew that the society had it wrong. That we weren't to be stuck in a corner and as dumb as they thought we were. And that's what I realized more than anything, I think. And the support, not to belittle men at all, but the support that women could give each other out here. It was astronomical what we did, was how we helped, well, me, myself, really grew out here, but other students that would come out here, help them believe in themselves.
So you went from being so quiet that you sat in the corner and let other people
Oh, yeah.
talk to doing all this amazing work with support.
I even took speech, which helped, thank God.
It helped.
Yeah.
How'd your family
Oh,
view these changes?
well, it was just me and my kids, and then my family, my mother and my father, aunts and uncles. They were all very supportive. They thought what I was doing was great. In fact, when I finally graduated with my AA, my aunts and uncles from around here all came to the graduation.
Gavin
And my
graduations-
kids.
Gavin graduations are wonderful.
They're fun.
Yeah, everybody's there.
Yeah.
What impact did seeing their mom go through college, struggle, do all this work, what impact do you think that had on your kids?
I don't know. Have to ask them. I think what I wanted, it isn't always what we want, it's not what we get all the time. But what I wanted is for them to know that they could do it too. That, you know, they did, just to give them someone to believe in. That they had what it took to. No matter what kept us down.
And it's worked that way.
Oh, yeah. I think so. I'm proud of them. They're all working.
I have one more question for both of you, and then let's open it up. I'll give my students a chance to kind of think about their questions while we ask this one other question. If there's one thing that you would like to change for young women that you had to contend with, what would be the thing that you would really like to see change? Maybe it's already changed or maybe it hasn't, but what's something you really, played a role in your life that you liked other people to not have to deal with or deal with differently?
I guess opportunity. And to eliminate the stereotypes. You know, those would be the two things. I think, I'm gonna share one more experience relating to opportunity. When I was in high school, there were no girls' sports. And so I wanted to play on the boys' tennis team. My brother when I was a sophomore, my brother was a junior, and he was number one on the team, and he and I played in junior tournaments a lot together, and I thought, you know, I could go out for the team. I could probably be 4th or 5th on a ladder of 6. And so my mom and I met with the high school principal and asked if I could play on the boys' tennis team, and the answer was no. And we said, well, is there some other group we could ask, you know? And he said, well, I could probably take it to the league, but I'm not willing to. And it was like, unfortunately, I guess we accepted that answer and we moved on. But, you know, those opportunities that I didn't have that young women have now, be it in sports or going into, you know, whatever profession you want to be in. And then not being stereotyped. Leah said, you know, teaching's a great profession, I love it, so is nursing, but at one time those were your choices. Now you have unlimited choices of what you want to do. So, you know, I think opportunity and not having a stereotype as to what you have to be.
I want to tell you that I was at a restaurant in Gilroy last night, and there was a poster for the Gilroy High wrestling team, and one of them was our girl.
All right.
They have their own team.
Yeah, and there were only 6 or 7, and one of them was female.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
yeah.
I guess what it's similar, I guess, to what Susan said is I don't want to see the girls come up like I have granddaughters. I don't want to see them come up and hit the wall that they can't do anything they want to do. I want them. I don't like the idea that there's still positions that women aren't going to take or can't take, shouldn't take, because they're going to let everyone down. They're going to screw it up or something. Excuse me. They're going to mess up. I think that I would like to see them be, just like I said, be able to do anything they want.
Did you
not.
get the message as a girl or a young woman that you couldn't or shouldn't do
I didn't get it from my family, but I got it from the teachers. I don't know if I should share this, and from the doctors, you know.
Go ahead.
Well, when I was going for a divorce and I knew I was going to have surgery, I was going to have my gallbladder out, and I had 3 kids, and I knew I wanted to get my tubes tied. Well, the surgeon said I had to have my husband's permission. And after I reamed him a new one and told him I finally was able to speak up for myself and say, I'll sue you then. I'm not gonna, whatever it takes. And so he finally let me do what I wanted to do, or I was allowed to get those tubes done. That was it. My uncles even told me, "You go ahead and do it." I asked my family a lot of things, what I should do, you know. I have these ideas, I should do these things. And I put it through them first, just because sometimes I have some ideas that I probably shouldn't follow through on. And, but this was one they all agreed on. But I couldn't believe that doctor.
And he was typical.
Yeah, and my cousin, just a year older than me, we're real close. She went to graduating high school. She wanted to be a police officer. And the counselor tried to talk her out of it, or talked her out of it, because women just don't do that. So,
I think I'm old enough to have also been scarred by that. You're
Yeah.
scarred by it. You see it happen to your friends, your sisters, it happens to you once or twice, and it's really discouraging.
yeah. But you don't let it stick with you. You just go ahead and do what you want.
Well, that's obviously what you both did, to our benefit. So let's open it up and see if the students have questions, and I hope they do, or if anybody in the room has questions. Anybody want to ask anything?
I was gonna ask, it's for both of you guys. Were you always motivated for your goals, or did you ever want to give up because you felt alone as being one of the first few women?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Were you always motivated to achieve your goals, or did you ever want to give up because?
Oh,
there was
yeah, I
so much
wanted to
against
give
you?
up a lot. But no, I came back. You couldn't, especially being here out at the campus, even not just the ReEntry program, but people like Rolf Bruckner, Robert Funk, the other teachers out here, they supported you. And they didn't all agree with the women's ReEntry program. I think it was important as the rest of us did, but they did support you. Many of them, not all of them.
So that helped you go on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but out of my family. And just looking at my kids. There's always something you can find to help you make that decision. You just don't give in.
My mom was always positive, you know, I mean, she was the one that went, again, helped me meet with the high school principal to find out about playing tennis, but she was always positive, so I had some positive female role models, so, you know, like anybody, you push through things, you may take a couple steps back, but then you move forward, so, you know, you learn lessons. Like I said, I had to learn a lesson about how to deal with my counterpart males and their personalities, and that helped me. So yeah, you just move forward.
So, did your family help you take care of your children?
So let me repeat it. Did your family help you take care of your children?
Sometimes. I had an aunt that lived close to me that I had helped her take care of her son, so she helped me take care of mine. I also had childcare in Gilroy.
So my mom was a single mother when she was going through college,
Mhm.
and she had a lot of trouble with childcare, so I was wondering if you had anything like that.
Yeah, I did.
You know.
I did. The childcare I had my kids in, it was okay, but it wasn't the best, and they did things that I felt kind of traumatized my kids at times. So
Didn't you say you also used Gavilan had a?
yeah, Gavilan had the childcare here too. So when but the kids had to be potty trained and stuff.
Yeah.
So before they got potty trained, I had to have them somewhere else. Yeah, it was hard, and it's hard for a single parent to do that. You know, to go off and well, it was hard for me. I know most of the women I went through school with, it was hard for them to leave their kids with other people. As you know, you love your kids best.
How was the Gavilan program?
It was good. Yeah, it was. I thought it was a good program. And we spent a lot of time as parents. One of the things you did there is you volunteered time. So you were there in the program with the kids at different times. So
That program was cut in 2000 something.
I know a couple of my grandkids went there.
Yeah, it was a good program.
A couple of Angie's kids were there.
And we had one male college president after another
Mhm.
who, weeping women with babies in their arms would come to the board meetings to beg that the program be extended, and sometimes it was, and sometimes
Yeah.
then eventually it got cut First it was reduced, then they took the building.
Sometimes we brought kids on campus, and women who were not having classes at the time would watch the kids out on the campus, which I think encouraged them to keep it open for a while, because we were in the cafeteria a lot, so, different places.
What else? What questions?
So first I want to say thank you for helping Community Solutions get going, because I took my daughter there she was forced to go there in 1995 to go through one of the programs.
Yeah.
And it made a big difference for her. So, but I'm wondering how were the classes as far as sociology and social justice and things like that?
We didn't have social justice. I said,
Right.
I'm gonna look this up and figure it. I would have taken this class. Any social
Yeah.
justice, yeah. That would have been great. I mean, it was awesome when they finally got women's studies classes here. Many of the teachers, though, they didn't gear their class any different towards women, but they did include some things, like in the economics class. I forget who that teacher was.
Ken Miller?
Ken, yeah, it was Ken. And he had brought up, some stuff that pertained to women working in economics. And so they all, many of them, not all of them, I take that back, because there's some who didn't, tried to include everyone, not just the student, not just the younger students.
I took classes here in 2002 and 2005 for computer stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I found it a little difficult
Yeah.
because it was new for women to take, those kind of classes.
Oh, yeah.
And I did it through the ROP program, so I wasn't really a student either.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it,
Made it a little more difficult. huh?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But I've seen amazing changes since
Yeah.
then.
isn't it? Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm
Thank
gonna
God.
ask a naughty question, because that's my role. Then you don't have to answer it unless you want to, and you don't have to name names.
Okay.
Were there any professors who kind of got a reputation among the reentry women as not being friendly to the program, or not being
Oh,
friendly
yeah.
to women? Or,
No, I won't name names. Yeah,
okay,
they were.
okay, so you just stayed away from them?
If we could, yeah.
Okay.
If not, more than one of us would join the class so that we could support each other.
I think just like any campus, the students talk about, oh, this is a good instructor to take, or
Yeah.
maybe
Oh,
not a good
yeah.
instructor to take, or this is what you're gonna get if you take this instructor, so that's, I think it's wonderful that you are social justice majors, and that Leah was one of the ones that developed that, or that was the person that developed that. I work a lot with curriculum, and I know that everybody in the counseling and stuff was excited to see that as a major come through, and it's nice that you have that opportunity.
Yeah, we kind of have to fight for it, because, if the numbers are low now, you have to, get the numbers up.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, it's always a struggle, but it's a struggle worth.
That happened when we started the women's classes in the 70s too. You had to keep them filled.
For Susan, for the women's sports teams you did, were there other women's sports teams your team could go up against? Or were there any, guy teams that were willing to play with you guys?
Just the 3 sports teams, is that the question?
Of the ones, were there women's teams at other colleges, or
Oh.
did they have to play
Yeah,
men, or?
no, the Bay Area, when women's sports came in 1976, it came in all the community colleges in this area, Cabrillo, Hartnell, Monterey, San Jose.
It was a federal
So
mandate.
there was a,
You had to do it or lose
yeah.
your money.
So there was a conference called, as I said, BACWA, Bay Area Women's Collegiate Athletic Association. So that was a conference, and so we played a schedule, a designated schedule against other schools in that conference, and, someone would be the conference champions. So.
Did the male sports teams ever kind of skirmish with you, or
No,
practice with you, or anything?
No, they do now, but they,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very popular to do it now, especially basketball. You have bigger, stronger people competing against the women. No, we didn't.
Different worlds. Any other questions that somebody wants to ask that they haven't?
Well, I think one of the main challenges was more community-based. People didn't think it was needed. But I think that's changed a lot from what I understand now. There's a lot of people are more supportive about our programs, that type of program. The one challenge I did face, and I face this with my regular counseling too, is you gotta take care of yourself when you're doing this. You really, you gotta take that time to take care of you too, because it's good to be empathetic and you can't help but to want to help people. But first, you got to take care of yourself before you can help anybody else. So keep your strength and keep your emotional strength up. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions? You're just too shy to ask. It's not a shy group. So why don't we just end here, intermingle, eat, drink, talk informally, and thank you both so much. This was really, it was as amazing as I thought.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad I was able to come. I learned a few things myself. It was nice seeing you again, Susan.
Yeah.
But I love this idea of social justice classes. I didn't know that's what it was called. It's just exciting.
And take
Yeah.
the program.
I will have to.
Let's